Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center right here in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. And I for sure know that this next hour is going to do just that. I am very pleased and honored to have two important folks in our Metro Phoenix and Greater Arizona community with us today. We have Kimber Lanning, who is the CEO for Local First Arizona. Welcome back to the studio.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
It's been a while.
It's been a long while.
I'm glad you're here. I think I've invited, and then I'm like, I ghost you, and then I invite you, and we finally made it happen. And we're very pleased that Angela Huey's with us as well. She's the co-founder and president for One Community. Welcome, Angela.
Happy to be here.
I should say welcome back as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Although this is the first time I've had the honor to have both of you in the studio at the same time.
Well, it's a little bit like a Sasquatch sighting to have us in the same place at the same time.
That's perfect.
You know,
I feel so special.
Nobody's going to believe you. So.
Right. So, but they will, because it's on LinkedIn
right.
Live via video right
Absolutely.
now. Good. And Darby's over here
We need
with
to make
full
sure
swing
that
video taking photos. So
we have to have proof.
that's right. So we are here to have just an important conversation. The timing is critical. We've got a lot of work to do, and we want to make sure that people are aware, involved, and that they're just setting their sights on what they and their communities can do on behalf of Arizona and some decisions that need to be made. So let's start, though. Let's back up the train. Let's have each of you introduce yourselves and your organization, and then let's talk about what's coming up in November for us and how we can be of great service to each other.
Sure. Sounds good. Local First Arizona is a statewide organization that's working to build a more diverse and inclusive Arizona economy. We are the largest local business coalition in the country, and we do a lot of work to help develop entrepreneurs. So we're symbiotic spirits here with the Max 6 community. We believe that entrepreneurship is our strongest weapon to battle the wealth gap that has erupted across the country. Many people don't realize that Arizona is number 2 for the wealth gap, that distance between our wealthiest and our poorest communities. And so we are working statewide to help uplift existing businesses, to make them stronger, to create more jobs, as well as the startup community, helping people with the resources they need, whether it be information, education, or access to capital, to launch a successful business. You know, I like to remind people every small business is a family, and every family matters.
And I know, so Thomas Barr has an opportunity to be in here with us typically once a month for the show that we do together, Arizona Good Business. And I feel like most of his focus has been Greater Phoenix, Metro Phoenix area. Is that, maybe I'm wrong. I know we've talked about Tucson, and correct me if I'm wrong. This is a question, maybe.
Sure.
I know your focus the last several years has really been to say this is about Arizona, right? Am I botching that up? Help clean that up.
So we merged with the Arizona Rural Development Council in 2013. And so my work is completely statewide. We have a team specifically working in rural that's 7 people. And then in addition, we have a variety of other programs that intersect in rural. So for example, our sustainability program, which is an entrepreneur training program for those businesses that want to be green, or to existing businesses that want to become more green. We're doing that up in the Verde Valley. We expanded our Fuerza Local, which is our Spanish language business accelerator, also up into Cottonwood and Sedona area. We have 3 people up in our Flagstaff office. So we have a variety of programs, but we are most definitely statewide.
Okay, I'm gonna clean that up when I say that in the future.
Sure.
And I believe that the Spanish business group meets here at Max 6 still. Am I right about that?
So yes, what we have is Nivel Ejecutivo, which is next level executive. That is the more advanced Spanish language class. So everyone has gone through Fuerza, and they're doing at least $350,000 a year in sales to qualify to get into Nivel.
And that's who I see here once a month, I believe.
That's exactly right.
So good. All right. Anything else you want to drop for us before Angela has an opportunity to?
Well, I think it's just important to remember that small business owners live here in Arizona. They're committed to Arizona, and they feel accountable for Arizona, which is why we're such strong partners with other organizations like One Community, because these are our neighbors. They're our friends. They're our people that we know from our faith-based institutions, from our schools. And so this is a wave of people who feel accountable for the future of this state. And we are linking arms and saying yes to democracy.
You could end the show there.
Yeah, I was like, you didn't need to have me.
Of course.
That is so not true.
That is so not true. So tell us about One Community and about Angela.
Sure. It's remarkable to me that we're turning 14 years old. So that's crazy. And Kimber was foolish enough to sit down with me, I think, when we were about a week old. And I'm like, this is what we're doing. She was like, all right, dude, I'm in.
Wow.
And hasn't said no since then. So we're just incredibly grateful for this long, thoughtful, collaborative partnership with Local First Arizona. So we've evolved a lot since we came to market in December of 2008. One Community is a member-based coalition of businesses and organizations and everyday Arizonans moving diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality for all of us forward, right? To Kimber's point, when you look at our urban areas and then you look at our more rural areas, we're currently living in really, we like to say, two Arizonas, right? So we have 10 LGBTQ inclusive municipal ordinances in the state now that are, these are cities that understand that diversity and inclusion of all Arizonans, including LGBTQ plus Arizonans, is the right thing to do and also really good for the sustainability of the municipality. But when we look population-wise, we only cover about 50% of the state. So if you're LGBTQ and you're a traveler to this great state, travel being the number one economic driver in Arizona, then depending on the zip code that you're in, you may or may not have the same rights as your non-LGBTQ counterparts. So we know we can do better. We're thrilled that we've got that number to 50%. We really need to be statewide and inclusive and open and celebrate and respect and protect everyone that lives in this great state and visits this great state. And we believe in our like really deeply thoughtful bipartisan model. And that, you know, so much so that we created the Equality and Fairness for All Americans Coalition this year. So it's really a bipartisan framework so that the United States can really treat everyone fairly and equitably and have equal policy protections as well.
So not just Arizona. This is that next level.
Yeah, well, of course, next level.
Right. You're sitting next to Kimber. How could it not
How could
be?
how could we not be next level? But we really believe in bipartisan solutions. We really believe in meeting people where they're at. We believe that LGBTQ freedoms and religious freedoms go hand in hand, that someone doesn't have to lose something so that people that are members of diverse minority communities have a seat at the table and also have equal protections under law. And so we're known for leaning in and having a cup of coffee with anyone, or if you don't drink coffee, it's a beverage with anyone.
Right.
If for whatever reason, you know, you're not into caffeine, that's okay. But yeah, I think that it's been a remarkable journey, and the best is yet to come. And it's going to probably get pretty bumpy here to get to the best is yet to come part.
Excellent segue. Yes. So we purposely planned for this particular segment right around now because we are coming up upon an election and I'm not as well versed as both of you. So I would love to just open up the floor and let's talk to our listeners and our viewers around what we're up against and why does it look like it's going to be a difficult road?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of reasons, and Kimber, you jump in here when you want. So we have gerrymandering, you know, and so when we did redistricting, which happens every 10 years around the census, we don't have a lot of competitive districts, right? And so because of that, we give an overabundance to the primaries and, you know, really, I would say, an exclusionary practice and make it really tough for independents to vote in the state of Arizona. So the majority of voters in Arizona are like myself. They're registered independent. The majority of independents don't know that they can vote, which is in the primary, which is really problematic. And we have additional steps that if you are a registered independent, you have to take so that you can pull either a Democrat or a Republican ballot to vote in the primary. And so because of that, we have really, really low independent voter turnout in the primary. And so many of our races are really decided in the primary. And so because of gerrymandering, because we make it more difficult for independents to vote, we are really putting up more fringe-based candidates when it gets to our general election. And we have some folks that are running in the state that deny the viability of the 2020 an outcome of the 2020 election. We have people that want to take away, voting by mail. 75% or more of registered Arizonans vote by mail. They want to make it harder for everyday Arizonans to actually let their voice be heard at the ballot box. And so it's tough.
I think it's critically important. We have somebody running for Secretary of State right now who has voted by mail for the last 18 years, and yet who is now saying voting by mail is not secure and we can't do that anymore. So if you can imagine 7 million people living in Arizona all attempting to stand in line at polling stations and vote in person in one day. And how we will possibly do that. So I think it's really important for voters to listen to what these candidates are saying and think about how it will impact their own lives. The other thing that I just want to talk about is, and Angela touched on, I just want to underscore independence. I think there's something very interesting going on right now, which is that the Democrats think of independents as moderates. And the Republicans think of the independents as independents and potential fans, right? And so I don't think we need to be speaking to independents with one uniform voice, because it's a bucket, it's a catch-all for everybody that is disenfranchised with the two-party system. So there are extreme candidates on one side or the other that are independent. So we can't speak to them in one tone, and they are going to decide this election. There's no doubt about it. There's not a race or a proposition out there that likely won't be decided by independents, because they're the largest voting bloc now, and they don't have a specific language that speaks to them. So I think we're in a really unique place. And I would just also mention that the sheer number of propositions that voters in Arizona are facing this year is staggering, and it's so hard for busy families to really understand what's at stake.
So in addition to media opportunities like this, what are your organizations doing to help educate and prepare people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we got together and said, we have to have we have to basically have a web-based convening, right? And so we collaborated and created Your Vote Is Your Voice. YourVoteIsYourVoice.com, nonpartisan, and it really is a place for everyday Arizonans to educate themselves about these ballot propositions, about the candidates that they're looking at, and where they stand on issues that they care about. And because really an educated voter is a really powerful voter, is a really powerful Arizonan, and we want to make sure that, again, folks are really well educated, and so that their vote really is their voice, so that they understand who they're voting for, what these propositions mean to their families, to their businesses, and really to the sustainability of Arizona. So we're doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot around that. There's so many assumptions that are out there. I just spent last weekend out running a local First Arizona booth in partnership, a Your Vote Is Your Voice booth, essentially at Pride. Of the people I spoke with there, I would say 70% were planning to vote, 30% were not planning to vote. And we're anti-voting. One woman actually said to me, if I don't vote, they can't try to tell me for the next 2 years who stole my vote. I don't want to listen to it anymore, right? So 30% is a pretty large block of people that are disenfranchised. And I would also say people have forgotten. There's a great article in The Atlantic about we can still persuade each other. There's still the art of civic and civil debate. And so, for example, I went to the booth at Pride for the gay Republicans, I just wanted to have a conversation to better understand what their primary issues were. Their priorities were, number one, the sovereignty of our nation. They feel that our nation is compromised by our southern border, and they felt that fentanyl coming through the border through illegal immigration was their main priority, and that's really difficult, right? Because I'm a fact-based person. We know that fentanyl is coming through our legal ports of entry. Families don't have their pockets stuffed with fentanyl when they're trying to cross over to go to work. So we're talking to people who have succumbed to fear-based tactics, right? Where they really believe there is an invasion occurring and that we are susceptible to some sort of takeover, which I just don't believe is true. And their second point was the Second Amendment, right? The right to bear arms. And we tried to have a conversation about the logic of having, high speed semi-automatic weapons on the street, right? And they felt that it was necessary for everyone to have access, because if someone attacks your family using these weapons, that you need to be able to defend yourself. The reason I'm sharing this right now on your podcast is because it is so important for each one of us to be able to listen, to use our critical thinking skills, to respond in a civil way. I shook both of their hands. I thanked them for their time and I moved on. And it was insightful to me to have two white gay men who believe and have fallen victim, in my mind, to these kinds of threats. Now, am I going to say there's no problem on the border? No, we have a significant immigration problem, and our politicians have passed the buck for years and decades. So absolutely. But I do think one of the most important things that one community and local first are good at is throwing a broad umbrella and being willing to talk to anyone, being able to listen to their perspective and to help them think critically through the barrage of misinformation that is coming through all kinds of media at this point.
Yes.
Nod our heads. Yes.
Well, I would say it's so interesting that you were in a booth with gay Republicans. I was in a meeting yesterday with Michael Soto, who just joined our team as our new chief advocacy officer. We really saw an opportunity, really from an advocacy standpoint, for one community to get even more deeply involved. And we care about issues that are not just about LGBTQ inclusion. We really think that there are bipartisan solutions around DACA and immigration as well, right? And said, what have we done here and how can we do more good, right? We have a deep, bipartisan business coalition of more than 3,400 businesses, and that's deeply rooted in the Unity Pledge. We also have this really, really large faith-based coalition, and we will have a cup of coffee with anyone. We have this really burgeoning, beautiful relationship that's happening with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where we met at the most vulnerable time when the Mesa ordinance last year was under attack, and put out a joint statement and said, how far can we take this relationship? And I think when you meet people when they're vulnerable and you trust them, you know who they are at their core. And, for the first time ever, the church came out in support of fully inclusive LGBTQ inclusive policy, not just in employment and housing, but in public accommodations. And we did that in a vulnerable time in a city that is center right, led by a really, really remarkable, courageous mayor and city council who believe that everyone should be welcome. And also, again, that LGBTQ inclusion and religious freedom do not have to be oppositional, right? And we have been able to forge deep friendships with people of faith, and I think be impactful because we just meet people where they're at and we share our stories, and we're not coming into any of these conversations from a place of judgment, right?
I also just would, the fact that you now have more inclusivity in Mesa and you have these expanded rights, which everyone else has already had, doesn't mean that anyone else has lost any rights.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's so critically important because people feel that things are being taken away from them. Right. And that's just simply not the case. And so we need to continue to have these dialogues.
Yes, Kimber, it's not a zero-sum game, right? You don't have to lose something for me to have the same opportunities, right? And that's why these dialogues are so important. That's why this discussion is so important. That's why this commitment to your vote is your voice, I think this year and moving forward is so important. And I feel that we are really getting our sea legs. We are doing it in an incredibly important election, but also that this will lead to additional educational opportunities of just like, what is your civic duty as an Arizonan? We want you to step up. We want your voice to be heard. And this, whatever this is, isn't someone else's problem. Number one, this is about all of us, and you absolutely can be a part of the solution, right? I think giving people accessibility to doing things that are actionable and feel good, and teaching people that they absolutely have a place at whatever table it is, in whatever discussion it is, I think is a really important part of what we have to do organizationally. And I believe what we will continue to do as we delve deeper with Your Vote is Your Voice and this educational platform we've created together.
What role can a business owner play in education? Do you see a role for a C-level executive or someone who maybe even just has a very small team? How would you encourage someone like that to get involved and lead?
Yeah, I'll share just a little thing that I did myself as a business owner. Take off my local first hat. I'm also a small business owner. I put a 2-foot by 2-foot sign on the front door of my store that says, "You are entering a woman-owned business. Please vote. Vote because these things are on the ballot. Democracy, privacy. These are important issues. And if you don't know how to vote, if you don't know about the proposition, if you don't know, don't be embarrassed. Just ask us at the counter." And I've printed out what I call a cheat sheet that has information in a nonpartisan, just factual information on all the different propositions at the front counter. So my staff doesn't feel that they're trying to encourage someone to vote a certain way. We are just actively out there reminding people to vote. So I printed off 10 of them and I took them to a lot of my other women-owned business. But that's just one small example about what a business owner can do. Also, with our team, we're very careful on the language. I'm not telling my team how to vote. What we did, I think it's important for owners to recognize hierarchy within your company. Even if you work really hard, you have to be sensitive to the fact that you are still the owner, and people, if you're asking them to vote, they still may be feeling pressured by you or somehow that they're going to be retaliated against. So we created a fingerprintless Google Doc where anybody can go and look at this information if they want to. So I didn't email the information to anyone. I notified them all. Here's where you find it. Go look at it if you want. And that's just the way that we encourage them through education to be actively engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and here's something cool you can do too if you're a business owner, no matter what size the business is. If 75% of people are voting by mail, that means 25% of people aren't, right? Give your team the day off on Tuesday, November 8th, right? And I think I would love to see every election day actually be a holiday, right? A paid holiday. I think that would make a great deal of sense. To Kimber's point, encourage that civic participation and encourage people how to vote, and also do it in a nonpartisan way, because we don't want people to feel pressure, right? Pressure to vote a certain way. We want people, I think, to understand the remarkable power and responsibility and accountability that they have to make their voice heard at the ballot box.
Fascinating. Who are you aware of what other businesses are doing on ideas? I mean, that's a brilliant idea, and I'm a women-owned business right here at Business Radio X, so I can't wait to.
Well, I want to throw it out there.
I have an extra one in my car.
I'm taking
it in.
There you go. We've got some of Your Vote is Your Voice signs too, Karen. And I
did mine. In fact, maybe Daryl can pop out and grab it. Yeah,
I love it. But I want to throw it out there too. Like, if any business wants any of the Your Vote is Your Voice collateral, and we have really cool postcards, and they take you directly to yourvoteisyourvoice.com. I mean, we will deliver these to any door, not just in the Valley, but I think anywhere throughout the state too. I mean, it's really important that we understand that this is about encouraging everyone in the state of Arizona.
If you'll make sure that we have some here, right? The cool posters, and then you have some pamphlets.
We have postcards. We have really cool stickers, and everything has a QR code. Will take you directly to yourvoteisyourvoice.com. It's a really just thoughtful, easy website, and of course, everything is nonpartisan.
I'm going to admit that in past elections, being that I am busy at owning businesses and, coming up with excuses right now for you, but that's the way I thought in the past. I would be familiar with a handful of propositions and I would vote on those. And then I wouldn't take time to research and educate myself on the others. And I'm saying that out loud because I'm quite certain that I'm not the only one.
Absolutely. And what else is those pesky judges? I mean, it's so hard to know.
Right. And I go blind looking at it.
And now we see the damage judges can do,
Correct.
right? And with our rights. So I think it's really important that people educate themselves on the judges. So those are included in the cheat sheet that I mentioned, just voting records. This person is in support of this and has traditionally ruled against this, just so people know.
And it's just it's factual information for everything on the website, and then we get to just make a decision.
That's right.
And then take that to our vote.
That's right.
And a naive question. I am the person who does like to physically go stand in line and vote early in the morning. There's just something very patriotic for me for that. I am allowed to bring a cheat sheet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's interesting. I did that I used to have these, beautiful patriotic moments until things started getting so ugly. And, it's not worth it to me to listen to racist remarks. I was no longer feeling patriotic.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important for people to have the option, right?
Yes.
And now I vote by mail, and I'm okay with that.
Are you familiar with the timeline? Can you share the timeline for voting by mail? I don't know.
Oh, goodness.
I think it's like there's another 2 weeks. And we can share some information too. So when you do vote by mail, there is a Maricopa. If you're in Maricopa County, you can text so that Maricopa County tells you that they have received your ballot.
Oh, that's good.
And so, I'll actually talk for 30 seconds and I'll
Talk
look this
amongst
information
yourselves.
up for us.
So Angela
Thank
had
you.
mentioned the fearless mayor of Mesa, Mayor John Giles, who has been remarkable. I just stood with him last week in support of Prop 308, which is going to allow
DACA students.
dreamers, essentially, you can call them DACA or dreamers, to be access in-state tuition rates to go to college. They have to have gone to an Arizona high school and graduated, and they have to have been there at least 2 years. Again, good and legitimate question. There was a gentleman in the audience who said, isn't this choice just going to encourage illegal immigration, that people will come over to try to access our colleges? Well, my response to that is high school kids generally don't come across the border to enroll in our high schools so that in 2 years they can go to college here. There's no pattern of that. And, and he kept insisting, well, a 30-year-old man coming across the border is not going to be able to enroll in Arizona's high schools. What we're trying to do is provide, these are Arizona's kids. Yep. They're Arizona's kids. Many of them have never even been to the nation where their parents came from, and they might have been here since they were an infant. And they have worked hard. They have graduated from high school, and they deserve to have access to the same rates as other Arizona kids. And so there's Mayor John Giles and also Mayor Kate Gallego from the city of Phoenix standing there advocating. A lot of wonderful business leaders making the economic case. It's not just a moral case. It's not a sad story that we're trying to. This is the future of Arizona. We have a workforce shortage right now. Why wouldn't we want to take these Arizona kids and give them the access to affordable college?
Kimber's right. There are talent pipeline, right? And when you look at millennials and you look at Gen Z, overwhelmingly these two generations, which are the business and community leaders of tomorrow, absolutely. Number one, they're the two most culturally diverse generations in America's history, and inclusion is a top driver for them. So that's why inclusive policy is so important too. There's a good economic business sense, but if we really want the top talent to stay here, we can bring business in, and you can have business expansion and from other states coming, folks, that and from other countries with Taiwan Semiconductor. But if we can't get top talent, we're going to have a real problem. And we have a talent shortage right now, right? And so when you look at the Dreamers, this is just a common sense solution, right? These kids have been educated in this great state. They are Arizonans. They are our kids. And we want them to raise their families and have their professional careers here. We don't want to dissuade them from staying in Arizona. We want this is where their history is. This is, where their lives have been spent.
And to Kimber's point, it's all they know.
Yeah.
Right. It's their home.
Right.
Yeah. It's our home.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You and I, prior to coming on air, we had talked about Steven Zylstra and Arizona Technology Council. I was happy to hear that they are members of one community. What other large organizations would you like to see become part of one community? Are those white? Are there? You're like, well, that's a bold question to ask.
I don't think there's no one.
I would
that
like
you
to see
wouldn't.
every business
Yeah.
become a one community business member, and we're so fortunate, right? I mean, and by the way, if you're a locally owned business, we have a reciprocating discount on our memberships, right? So
Yeah.
if you're a local First business member, you get a discounted one community business membership, and vice versa.
So I get
right?
a badge too when I,
Sure,
like,
of
I get
course.
the
Yeah.
badge.
We
Like-
might have
like-
we might have a
like
State
those
48
marathon,
shirt for
yeah,
you.
yes, right.
Yeah.
Those when you do your marathon and you like the Disney marathons, I do this one and this one, this
Yeah.
one. I get a certain certain medal. That's what we
There
need
you
to. We
go.
earn that medal. That's
There
good.
you go.
But I mean, Apple is a one community business member, and so
Fantastic.
and they've been fantastic. PetSmart is one of our. I'm doing a presentation on socially responsible business advocacy this coming Friday to advertising agencies, and the whole presentation is really about social responsible. Just the business reason on why corporations cannot stay on the sidelines. And my wonderful example is PetSmart, which is, corporate headquarters here in Arizona. And they have been with us during SB 1062. They're on calls with elected officials when we're talking about, bipartisan solutions and policy in the state of Arizona and federally. And they really walk the walk and are fully inclusive. And there's a new U.S. Chamber report that came out about 2 months ago. It's something like 7 out of 10 businesses believe in LGBTQ inclusive policy, but also are willing to lose business because of it. And PetSmart was, there was an attempted victimization by this really bad guy that came after folks in Target and then walked into PetSmart. And he is very, very homophobic and was just trying to really upset people. And what was so great about PetSmart is they said, we treat everyone fairly. We believe in belonging. We are absolutely proud to have our LGBTQ pride flag up. It's up all the time. Asked the gentleman to leave. He was saying some really horrible things, but then at the end, he's like, Petco is okay with all these things. And they're like, no. We're PetSmart. Yeah. So they're like, we really don't agree with, you've been in here on this really bad rant for 5 minutes and it's harmful. But by the way, get the name right because we stand for inclusion
Right.
and we are proudly PetSmart. So that's just kind of my story about PetSmart.
I love it. And you mentioned Apple as well. So
Yeah.
I think this is a great time to again delineate between the two organizations. You run in the same lane for a lot of things, and you also represent businesses differently. So Kimber, go back to local first, if you will, and why is it so important to vote? Or excuse me, not only vote locally, but shop locally.
Sure.
As kind of a counterpoint to what Angela just shared about these larger enterprises that are in huge support of what you're doing. But let's talk local.
Sure. So we have several reasons. Many people don't think about the fact that the way they spend their money actually impacts the way their communities grow. So when you choose to spend at a locally owned business, 3 times more of your money stays and recirculates.
3 times more.
Well, that's right. And when you hire let's say you buy a latte at a local coffee shop, that local coffee shop in turn has a local graphic designer, a local website developer, a payroll service provider, or accountant. So those are examples of when dollars stay. It's like people understand the concept of diversifying your portfolio, right? You want to keep your dollars recirculating as broadly as you can. So when you choose local over corporate, you're keeping more dollars here locally. When you spend with corporate, they're not going to hire those low. Occasionally they might, but a big company that's headquartered in another state is not likely going to hire a small graphic designer or website developer in the state of Arizona.
Mhm.
So when you play this out and you think to yourself, okay, so how is anyone going to be a graphic designer or a website developer, an accountant in rural America if we don't spend locally? People forget we're in a consumer-driven economy. We turn on the nightly news and we're convinced that the economy is something far away from us that somebody else is going to control. Whoever's in the presidency has a minuscule impact on how the economy is actually performing. We are the ones who are voting and setting policy by the people we vote, and we are the ones who are spending the money that drives the economy. So the choices we make actually do matter, and it's just far too easy to blame whoever's in the White House at this particular moment in time.
Mhm.
And I'm not defending whoever's in the White House. It would be other people would blame the last person who was in the White House. My point is, we are in a consumer-driven economy, and we have much more control than we think that we do. So we like to keep dollars recirculating with companies that are here locally. In addition, local business create the culture and unique flavor that makes us proud of our hometown. And that's something that people need to be reminded of too. If I asked 1 million people from Chicago why they love Chicago, they would tell you the locally owned businesses. They would say, I had the same barber for 40 years. They would say, I used to jump into that cafe, and they'd say, hey, Steve, you want the regular? They'd tell us all kinds of local stories about why they love Chicago. And yet that same person can move to Arizona and throw that behavior out the window and end up at only big box stores and never put roots here. I submit, if we're going to fix our biggest challenges in the state of Arizona, first we need to build a community that feels accountable for it.
Do you feel like we're moving in that direction? I've owned the studio for 5 years now, and I've been blessed to have folks like you who are really difference makers and voices across a lot of different verticals and industries. And it feels to me like it's shaping up a lot, that we're finally starting to sing from the same sheet of music. Are you
Yeah.
feeling that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just think about it. When I went to high school here, people were scratching and clawing to get out of here. We didn't used to have, I tell my younger staff, do not take those PHX tattoos for granted.
Right.
They didn't used to exist. The whole State 48 movement, I mean, it is,
huge.
it's emotional for me, having dedicated my life to making people feel accountable and proud of it. 2/3 of us came from somewhere else. We have got to welcome new people in and make them love this place the way we do. So, and it's happening.
It is happening.
Yeah, and I want to say something too from an accountability and a business standpoint too. So when we came into 2022, we really wanted to encourage, folks at the Capitol to not run divisive bills, and so we were proactive and had a letter called "It's Time to Unite, Not Divide." And 250 businesses and organizations of all shapes and sizes signed that letter, and it was large corporate entities, but 75% of the businesses and organizations that signed onto that letter were smaller locally owned businesses too. And so for us, this is a straddle, right?
Yep.
We need to make sure that we are reaching and talking to everyone that will have a conversation with us. And there are different levers, in particular when we're talking from an LGBTQ inclusive advocacy standpoint, right? I think one of the things that's most encouraging is the amount of locally owned businesses that actually signed on. When we really started putting letters out probably 4 or 5 years ago, it typically was larger corporate entities that, had a public policy committee. And what you're seeing is really businesses and organizations of all shapes and sizes saying, my voice matters. Yes, we want accountability, and we want to be on the record saying that we support an inclusive Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Excellent.
Mhm.
And it makes so much sense that both organizations just, again, run parallel and support each other. You mentioned 14 years for you.
Yeah.
And I know I should know this, and you may have
It's
said
okay.
it.
We're going to hit 20 in the first quarter of next year. So
Wow.
yeah, it's shocking.
Can you take us back? I would love for both of you to do this, but let's start with Kimber. Take us back to when this seed was planted on your heart and in your mind, because you really said a few moments ago that your entire life has been dedicated to that PHX or that AZ tattoo or sticker, whatever. Let's talk about just, do you recall? Do you remember?
I'll give you sort of a succinct high-level overview. I'm very fortunate. So my family landed here in 1968 when my father was transferred from Kendana Air Force Base on Okinawa, where I was born, to Luke Air Force Base. My grandparents on both sides were very entrepreneurial. My mom's self-employed. My father was a jazz musician when he wasn't in the military. They used to throw the kids in the van and drive around Arizona. And so by the time I was 10 years old, I'd visited 10 Arizona lakes. And when we did that, I didn't know it was unusual, but my mother was reaching out to all the little tiny bed and breakfasts, the little, independent, we had friends and family all over the state because of the connections we made when we traveled. I didn't know that wasn't what everybody was doing,
Right.
right? We never stayed in a big, large name brand hotel ever. And they would look forward to seeing us year after year after year. I mean, it was about relationships, right? And so when I started my business, came the second wave is in the music industry is really corrupt and biased as any industry out there. And so as a little independent trying to struggle and survive when Warner Brothers and Best Buy are negotiating a deal behind closed doors,
Mhm.
I was just fighting for me and all my other local business colleagues, my local record store colleagues, to have a seat at the table.
Mhm.
Then when I opened up Modified Arts on Roosevelt Row, it was the third wave of opening the door and recognizing that local municipal policy
Mhm.
is totally slanted against preserving old buildings and supporting local enterprises. So, there's 3 different levels of life experience that led me to the point of starting Local First.
I never have heard that backstory before. I'm so glad I asked.
Sure.
And for me, it was 1979, so just a handful of years after my dad got transferred with Litton Electronics and came out here. We were supposed to be here just for 2 years, and my dad fell in love with it, and so he raised the 4 of us here. And instead of a van, we were driving around the panel station wagon, and we did the same thing.
We had the panel station wagon first, and then we went to the van.
Right.
Ours was green. Ours was
ours
the olive
blue,
green.
and the wood paneling. And when I got my driver's license, I went through the ATM or the what else? What do you call the teller? And I ripped off the side paneling. And my dad's like, "We're gonna get you a smaller car." Do you remember those back seats and that?
Oh yeah,
crazy.
I have such distinct memories of riding to Big Surf in the very back seat facing backwards. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, when Big Surf closed, I shed a tear.
Yes. And are you Arizona original, or are you a transplant as well?
I grew up in a small Midwestern farming community, Ross, Ohio. It had 1 stoplight. It's tripled in size. It has 3 now. And my parents' hobby was Arabian horses. And so just an outdoorsy kid that grew up on 23 acres. And, we only came in when they called us because, it was dark outside. And so, we slept under the stars, and it was really amazing. And so in the early 80s, we started coming out to Scottsdale because of the big shows and sales. And my parents fell in love with Arizona. And so they moved us out here in the mid 80s, sold the horses. And I went from 23 acres to, I'm like, what's that like wall in the backyard? And why are we having Thanksgiving dinner on like the back patio? I was deeply disenfranchised.
And why
with
is
Arizona.
everybody's yard gravel and
yeah,
and
yeah. And I was
versus...
just like, I mean, it was definitely a culture shock, but we love it, and
it was
are deeply invested.
A lucky day for Arizona when her family landed here.
For sure. And then, so tell us.
Why one community? Yeah.
Like,
I think so. My background's media. And I was actually working in the Hispanic community. And I always thought there were so many parallels between the Hispanic community and the LGBTQ community. And I had a number of Hispanic community relations peers that I worked with in the work I was doing, and they all went through title changes. They all became multicultural community relations managers. And I was out, which was not the norm 15, 16 years ago at work. And out to my friends, and and I just was like, do you have money for the gay community? And they were all like, well, I work for conservative healthcare company XYZ, and we have money, but like, I'm like, what are you doing with it? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, we don't understand the diversity that is the LGBTQ community. And, again, we're like a pretty center-right company, and I can't, from an advertising standpoint, I can't get clearance to place like an ad next to like a 1-800-gay chat ad. And so my partner, Sherry, and I, remarkably, it's going to be 29 years, at lots of hills and valleys in our relationship. But we always used to just be like, we're just not gay enough, right? I'm like, we didn't feel like the advertising vehicles that were available, like really authentically represented who we were. And everything was, I think, very male dominated, and lots of swimsuits and tight chests and what have you. And so we're like, there's a need. And actually what we're seeing is businesses and organizations that are mid-size and larger, that have a very large voice and very large seat at the table in Arizona, actually have a spend for the LGBTQ community, but they need guidance and they don't know what to do with it. And so we sat at our dining room table and wrote the business plan for one community for about a year and a half. And marriage equality came to the state of California. And we emptied out our 401k. and put all,
Wow.
yeah, too naive to know that we could fail, which still exists in this head of mine, which is a good thing and gets me in all kinds of really good trouble. But emptied out the 401k, went to California, got married, and on the first day of our honeymoon, launched the first One Community website, and the stock market, the stock market crash happened like the next day, and it was like, oh my gosh, what have we done? Because we put all of our eggs in this basket, but I think that we were born in this really adverse time, and we've always found opportunity during adverse times. And so the reality was, no matter who you were, during the Great Recession, no one had too much business. And so we used to talk a lot when I was working in the Latino community about myth versus reality. And the myth was, everyone came here last night and has an issue with paperwork. The reality is, if you look at Arizona's Hispanic community, the vast majority of Hispanics that live in the state of Arizona are second, third, fourth, fifth generation Americans and are better educated than their non-Hispanic counterparts. That wasn't the story 15, 16 years ago. It's still, unfortunately, not the story today, but that's the reality, right? And when you looked at the LGBTQ community, the myth was, we're all swinging from a chandelier, but the other myth was, we have more money than God. And I'm like, we're going to go with more money than God, and we're going to educate people. And so I would just put my little business suit on, and I would go in, and I'm pretty good from a humorous standpoint, and would sit down with these CEOs that were just very uncomfortable. And I would say things like, I'm so sorry, I forgot to wear my, blank chaps today, or I left, and would say that everyone that drives a Subaru obviously is a member of the LGBTQ community. And so we would just like really crack people up.
But just soften the conversation.
Totally soften it up,
Yeah.
right? And have my little business suit on, and I'm like, here's who we really are, and we're this really diverse community. And we went with One Community because we're the most culturally diverse community in the world. We are every faith, we're every socioeconomic background, we are every culture, we're from everywhere, we are everywhere, we are every person's neighbor, we really are.
Sister, brother, friend, coworker. Yep.
And I think conceptually, because we weren't LGBTQ exclusive, because we've always been LGBTQ inclusive, right? And made this very much a conversation about our actionable allies and our belief and knowledge that we are a part of every community. We are local business owners and socially responsible entrepreneurs, and we are members, again, of every culturally diverse community. We did not wait for a seat at the table. We created vehicles like the multicultural conversation with the candidates for mayor. Remember when we did that one?
Yeah, it was
great.
that
was, and we were able to get 25, 26 culturally diverse organizations to participate in one conversation.
Wow.
And it was, I mean, it shook people that we were bringing all of our diverse communities and the local business community into the same room. But, that's who Arizona is. We've been a minority majority in 5 of our 15 counties since 2008. This isn't new. We are a culturally diverse, just richly diverse, populace. And that's what makes this state so unique and so great. And that's why we call ourselves One Community, right?
Beautiful.
So good. I really,
Don't get me started.
No, hey, this party's just getting started. Actually, it's just getting ready to end, at least for this time. Wow. So honored to have both of you here, and these conversations need to continue. Your vote, your voice.
Your vote is your voice.
Your vote is your voice.com.
Yep.
It's a .com.
.com.
Yeah. And you mentioned, and I know you do it plenty, you go out and you educate.
Mhm.
Are there opportunities for you and your teams to go out to an organization or a company if they're right? So if they want to have you come and do a presentation, we can make those arrangements.
Absolutely. That's how I started Local First. The first 6 years, it was just me. And there was no gig too big or too small. I mean, I had my slide presentation, the old day, big old fat laptop,
And your own projector.
And I mean, I didn't care if it was like a soccer mom meeting or sold out at the Orpheum. I was like zipping across this state. And so I would be more than happy to go talk to business owners about what we do, about how they can be more engaged. In fact, I'll tell you a fun story. Gentleman just reached out to me. He's taking over his father's business. His father's generation was entirely focused on growing the company out across the country. And he's like, but we've lived here now. What are we doing for Arizona? Nobody even knows we're an Arizona-based company.
If I could tell you how many times I hear that from business owners.
Sure. And so we sat down together and had a conversation about how we can help him almost rebrand as an Arizona company and be rooted here. What can he do? And people are starting to say, "Hey, wait a minute. What am I doing? How could I do
I
better?"
love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want you to brag on your team a little bit, because 20 years ago it was Kimber. And now you have, I mean, Thomas and I have touched base a couple of times. And by the way, the light in his eyes when he talks about how big the team is, because I know you kind of have accordioned in and out over the years, especially I think going into COVID or something.
No, it's been a pretty straight.
Has it?
It's
Okay,
been a
I'm-
straight. Yeah, we might have leveled off, but we I was very proud during COVID. We did not.
Okay,
We pivoted our events people into other roles. We did not let even a single person go. But
fantastic.
yeah, we just hired our 49th person. So here
And
here we
again,
are.
statewide, we're
That's right.
really talking about that growth,
Yeah.
and very exciting. And I've had a chance to see some of your teammates highlighted, and I've gotten to know a few of them. You really do have a dynamic team who really are all about Arizona
That's
and
it.
local
Yeah,
businesses.
I'm so fortunate.
Yes, you are. Well, you
Mhm.
built an amazing team. Your team. Is there a team?
Yeah, there is. There's 4 of us, but so we have a little bit different dynamic. So they're all local business owners. We have an events management team that runs all of One Community's events, but they own their own organization. We'll be announcing Full Swing Studios because we've been storytelling with Darby for 3 years, and we are, the majority partner in Full Swing Studios, and we want to lift Darby up and also
He's
make sure
amazing.
that
Mhm.
storytelling capabilities are available to businesses and organizations of all shapes and sizes, right? So the whole concept behind Full Swing is high quality video at prices you can afford, right? Like this, because this opportunity to tell your story should be accessible to everyone.
Yep.
We've worked alongside OH Strategic. They're our strategy and comms team. They are absolutely a part of the One Community team. They've been, walking alongside of us and keeping me out of most of our trouble for like over a decade now. So we accordion based on the event size that we're in. We have a wonderful local graphic designer that has been with us for many years. But we don't have so much that has to be, we really piece things out.
Yeah.
And so we're the size that we need to be
When you need to be
based on the event, and then love supporting these businesses and sending more business to them too.
I would love to have a shout out for the graphic designer if you have that prepared. Who is that?
Oh, Cultural Sponge. Yeah.
Perfect.
Heather Brown at Cultural Sponge. She's amazing. And I remember meeting her at Copper Star Coffee years ago, and she's just cool. She's like, I think what you do is just like really cool. And so, she responds to all of my emails regardless of the time of the day.
That's impressive.
Heather is amazing.
Yeah. And Darby, Full Swing Studios is right across from where my studio is.
Yeah.
And he and I are working on a collaborative project that we'll be doing in November together. And it's just really fun to get to know him and just resonate on the art and creation.
Well, and if I can just
growth.
brag for just a moment, because our biggest event of the year is our Spotlight on Success Local Heroes Awards.
Yes.
Our first ever ally honoree 12 years ago was this really cool person named Kimber Lanning. And we are absolutely over the moon to be really lifting Kimber up. She's our Unity agent this year. I think you're going to like what we came up with.
And
next Friday
is the celebration, the
28th, Friday, October 28th.
It's quite an honor.
I'm going to be
It's
out of
quite an
town.
honor.
Otherwise, I would absolutely be there.
No.
Yeah, really special. So good. All right. So we're winding down. Your vote is yourvoice.com. I had to get the is in there. And yes.
And we'll bring the swag to you. It's really cool. We want to make this easy.
Not just me, but anybody.
To anyone. So any business that, wants to have the posters or the stickers or the postcards for their customers that walk through their doors, just let us know. Shoot us an email at info@onecommunity.com, and we'll make sure someone drives the information out to you.
And if we're feeling stuck and we're not sure how we can show up as a business owner, an employee, or whatever, reach out to you guys and you'll help us find our way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Happy to help. And no one should be embarrassed. This is hard stuff. I mean, there's 3 voter suppression bills that are cleverly disguised as other things that will just make it more difficult to vote. There is not a person in Arizona that won't be directly impacted by the outcomes of this election.
Mm-hmm. Is there on the website or are there opportunities for someone who feels like it's overwhelming to have somebody kind of like a webinar or a time and place where we come together?
We've talked about doing that. And so I think Kimber just nodded at me and apparently we're going to do that.
Guess
so
what we're doing tomorrow
Guess
night.
what we're doing tomorrow night.
Planning that? That's what you're planning?
No, we just decided right
we'll
now.
Just do it.
Okay, good. I love that. I'm the audiobook girl. To get me to sit down and actually read a book, although I love the touch and the feel of a book. When I'm running or hiking, I'm listening to books. And so I feel like the same thing to look at a website. I've got to really commit, which I will, especially now I'm saying it out loud to both of you who I greatly respect. And at the same time, it's helpful for me to have someone teach and guide me. Yes, I look forward to whatever you come up with tomorrow night.
Great. And I'm happy to just call you at like 1:00 in the morning and leave you long voice messages.
I'm
one proposition at a time.
I expect at least one of those phone calls. I can't say that I'll answer at 1:00, but I'll wake up to the voicemail.
It's all about
you can run on the audio of Kimber's voice, right?
I love it.
You have 10 new messages.
Oh my God. That would be better than some of the 10 new messages I've received in past lives. So I'll take your voice over some of the other ones. This has been a real treat. I genuinely respect both of you and the way in which you're showing up for our community. We are one community.
We are.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Mac 6 Entrepreneur Center right here in Tempe, Arizona. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean business. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki. Thanks for listening.